Grace, bring me the file. I'm going to the printer. Grace, can you pick mine up too? Grace, 2 glasses of water. Please. She moved fast, trying to balance a stack of files in one arm and a tray of water bottles in the other. Her blouse stuck to her back from the heat. Her face, kind as always, wore a soft, strained smile. 1 minute. Let me just finish this print job first, she said, breathless. The office was busy. Phones rang. Heels clicked. But Grace's desk was always the busiest corner. Not because she held a big title, but because everyone threw their tasks at her. Behind her, 2 stylish co-workers leaned in their chairs, watching her struggle. Office servant, one whispered. The other giggled. Does she even get paid for all that? Grace returned to her desk and tried to focus. Her actual assignment sat open in front of her, barely touched. Grace picked up her pen, scribbled a few numbers, then paused again. A message popped up from another team lead. Grace, can you run this downstairs quickly? She sighed, grabbed the folder, and stood. From across the office, one of the 2 girls shook her head. She'll be here all night. They both laughed. Grace didn't respond. Never did. Only moved fast, helped quickly, smiled kindly, and no one ever asked her if she was tired or helped. But she still showed up. That's what made her Grace. The office emptied out at 5 o'clock sharp. Bags zipped. Heels clicked. Laughter faded into the hallway. Grace stayed. Again. Typing quickly, checking over documents that weren't hers. Someone else's budget sheet. Another person's draft proposal. Her own report, still blank, blinked on her screen. Grace hadn't eaten lunch. She got up, walked to the kitchenette, and poured lukewarm tea into a chipped mug. Sat back down, tried to start again. A voice floated in from near the lift. Grace is still in there? One of the girls said. The other laughed. She doesn't even have a life. A pause. Well, I guess you don't need one when your job is carrying everyone else. Grace heard it, like she always did. She glanced at her reflection in the black monitor. Hair falling loose, eyes dull. Posture slouched. A girl doing too much for people who gave nothing back. Grace saved the document, stretched her hands, and stood to grab the last delivery she had promised a manager downstairs. When she returned to her desk, someone had left a snack packet, half-eaten, on her chair. She placed it in the bin without a word, went on to organize her desk, aligned her files, wrote tomorrow's to-do list, then turned off the light as she left the room. The woman always sat in the second cubicle from the left. Always early, always quiet. Her name was Maria, older, maybe late 50s, wore simple shoes, glasses that slid down her nose. Her typing was slow, her handwriting neat but unsure. Every morning, the manager called out mistakes from her desk. Misspelled again. Wrong formatting. Maria, this isn't acceptable. Maria would nod softly. I'll fix it. The others never looked up. They acted like she didn't exist, except Grace. That afternoon during lunch, Grace walked into the cafeteria and found Maria eating alone. No tray, just a piece of bread. She sat across from her without asking. You okay today? Grace asked gently. Maria smiled tight. I'm fine, dear. But her eyes were tired. Her fingers trembled slightly as she sipped from her cup. Grace leaned in. I heard what he said this morning. Maria lowered her gaze. It's all right. Grace shook her head. It's not. You're working hard. I'm just not as fast anymore, Maria said softly. But I need this job. My daughter just started university. Grace nodded, quiet for a moment. Then I'll help you. Maria blinked. You can't do that. You've got your hands full. I'll manage, Grace said. You don't have to go through this alone. Maria looked at her, and for the first time, someone really saw Grace too. She smiled. Thank you, child. I hope they see you one day like I do. Grace returned the smile. Maybe, but for now, let's fix your report. And they did. Together. The next day they sat together again. Same corner, same small table. Maria brought rice. Grace shared some biscuits. I used to be sharp, you know, Maria said, voice low. Fast, organized. I trained 3 departments before you joined. Grace sipped her tea. I believe it. Now I mix up rows and copy wrong names. You're tired, not broken. Maria smiled sadly. You're kind. Grace hesitated, then said, You know, the way he talks to you, it isn't right. Maria folded her napkin. This job, it's all I've got. I'm too old to be job hunting. Grace nodded. That's why I'll help where I can. You focus. I'll check your spreadsheets when I finish mine. Maria reached across the table and held her hand. I don't want you to get in trouble because of me. I won't, Grace said firmly. I'm young. I can carry a bit more. They sat in silence for a while, 2 women from different stages of life. One fighting to hold on, the other stretched too thin but still reaching out. Across the room, the 2 younger co-workers laughed loudly, scrolling their phones. Maria said, They don't even see us, do they? Grace smiled. They will. When the break ended, they walked back together. Grace stopped at her desk, picked up a thick file and turned to Maria. Leave that one for me, okay? Maria hesitated, then nodded. Look at her, said one of the girls, watching Grace leave Maria's desk again. She's always around that slow old woman, the other one replied. Birds of the same feather. They laughed softly. Next thing you know, Grace will be forgetting passwords too. Grace passed by them with a soft, Excuse me. She held a printed file in one hand and a flash drive in the other. She didn't flinch at their whispers. Grace, one of them said suddenly, sugary sweet. If you're heading to the printer, could you grab ours too? The other chimed in. And if you're stopping by the kitchen, I could use water. Grace nodded. Sure. They giggled again when she walked away. She's really proud of being everyone's helper. Grace returned with everything. Papers stacked neatly, glasses balanced. She placed them gently on the desk without a word. Later, as she sat to catch up on her real work, another request popped up in her inbox. From a manager, from a teammate, from someone who always skipped the hard parts. She accepted them all. By the end of the day, her own task list was untouched. She stayed behind, again. Maria passed her on the way out. Grace, she said gently, you don't have to do this. Grace smiled, brushing a loose braid from her forehead. I know, but if I don't, who will? The older woman nodded. One day they'll see what I see. Grace looked down at the glowing screen, fingers hovering above the keyboard, ready for work. By Thursday, Grace had 3 lists on her desk. One for her own work, one for Maria's tasks, one for favors from everyone else. She moved between them like a machine, answering calls, printing reports, scanning documents, and cross-checking sheets. Maria whispered, You're doing too much. Grace smiled, thin. I'll be fine. The 2 flashy co-workers walked past with coffee in hand. Busy bee still buzzing, one said. The other smirked. Hope she gets paid for all 3 jobs. They weren't being quiet anymore. They didn't care if Grace heard. She didn't answer. Her hands moved fast. Her face stayed calm. At 3 p.m., the manager sent a message. Grace, review these figures before the 5 p.m. check-in. She opened it, sighed quietly, and got to work, after finishing 3 things for someone else. By 6 o'clock, the office emptied again. Grace stayed. She saved Maria's corrections, replied to the manager, organized the common folders, cleared the shared drive, and packed up quietly. Outside, the sky was already dark. She walked to the bus stop, feet aching. At home, her small rented room was quiet. She boiled water for noodles and sat cross-legged on the floor. She opened her phone. Messages? None. That was her life. One day it was nearly 6:30 p.m. when Grace heard voices rising from the manager's office. She had stayed late again, fixing layout errors for the finance lead. The office was quiet, just the echo of keyboards and a humming AC. But the shouting broke through the silence. She stepped into the hallway. The team supervisor stood outside the office, arms folded, face tight with anger. "I've had enough," he barked. "This place is falling apart, and you expect me to clean everyone's mess?" The manager replied sharply, "You're paid to manage, not to walk out." "Well, today I'm done." The supervisor grabbed his things, a box of scattered papers, a coffee mug, and a plant with yellowing leaves. He brushed past Grace without a glance. The manager stepped out behind him, face pale, shoulders tense. Grace looked at him. "Sir, everything all right?" He rubbed his temple. "Do I look all right?" She didn't reply. He shook his head. "Half this team doesn't submit reports on time. The other half hides behind deadlines. He was supposed to fix that." Grace looked at the files in her arms. "If there's anything I can help with, I'm still here." He sighed. "You're still working?" She nodded. "I just finished my part, but I can stay longer if you need." He paused, looked at her. "You sure?" She nodded again. He opened the door. "Come in." Grace sat across from the manager in his office, the air heavy with papers and tension. He slid a few folders across the desk. "Start with this." She flipped through quickly. Missing names, unfiled complaints, human resources issues left unfinished. "These should have been handled a week ago," he muttered. "Now they're all on my neck." Grace didn't speak. She took out her pen and began making small notes, one by one. The manager watched quietly. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. She didn't fumble. She didn't delay. She organized, printed, highlighted. By 7:45 p.m., she handed him a full breakdown. Sorted, clean. He stared at the papers, then at her. "You did this just now?" She nodded. "Where'd you learn to work like that?" She shrugged. "I studied admin systems in school, but no one ever asked." He leaned back in his chair, holding the papers. "This is cleaner than what the supervisor used to give me." She stood. "Let me know if you need anything else." He paused. "You free tomorrow evening?" She hesitated. "Yes." "Come back at 5. We'll finish the rest." She nodded, stepped out, and closed the door behind her. The following evening, Grace's hands moved fast. She clicked, printed, cross-checked, organized. The manager barely spoke as she worked beside him again the next night. At one point he said, "You're quick." She replied, "I've always been quick." Another hour passed. They reviewed 3 more departments. At 8:30 p.m., he pushed his chair back. "We're done for now." She smiled. "Good." He leaned forward. "Grace, why haven't I noticed you before?" She hesitated. "Maybe because I've always been in the background." He looked at her, thoughtful. "That's going to change." She nodded politely. "Thank you, sir." She left the office with a file tucked under her arm. Outside, the streets were quiet again. She caught the last bus, half empty, and leaned her head against the window. She felt tired, but satisfied. The next morning she came early, helped Maria, smiled softly at the guards. The 2 flashy co-workers didn't notice. They were too busy talking about the manager. One said, "He's going to choose someone for the role this week." The other grinned. "It has to be one of us." Grace passed by, quiet as always, minding her work for the rest of the day. The next morning, rain slammed against the streets heavily. Grace stepped outside, holding her old umbrella. Her blouse was neatly ironed, her hair pinned back, her bag heavy with papers. The bus station was packed. People huddled under thin metal roofing, shoulders wet, tempers high. A young woman stood near her, holding a sick child wrapped in a scarf. The child whimpered, "Mama, my chest hurts." The mother tried to soothe her, voice shaking. When a half-empty bus pulled in, people rushed forward. Grace moved with them, then stopped. She looked back at the woman. She was holding her child tightly. They wouldn't fit in the crowd. Grace turned, walked back and said, "Take this one." "It's not full yet." The woman blinked. "Are you sure?" Grace nodded. "Your child needs the hospital. I'll wait for the next one." Tears filled the woman's eyes. "Thank you. God bless you." Grace smiled, stepping back into the rain. By the time her bus came, she was soaked on one side. She had stood too long. Inside, her blouse clung to her back. Her bag dripped quietly at her feet. She kept checking her watch. 15 minutes late, then 20. When she finally arrived, the receptionist looked up. "You're late. They're already in the meeting." Grace caught her breath. "I'll go now." She dropped her bag, grabbed her notebook, and walked toward the boardroom. Her wet shoes squeaked on the floor. She knocked once. The receptionist's words echoed in her mind. "They've already started." She inhaled, knocked gently again, and pushed the door open. Every head turned. The manager looked up from his notes. "Grace," he said sharply, "you're late, very late." "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice calm. "There was an issue at the bus stop." The two flashy co-workers exchanged a look. "She's done," one whispered, barely hiding a smirk. "Maybe this is her exit," the other replied. Grace walked to the nearest seat, lowered her head, and sat quietly. Her pen slipped from her hand. She bent quickly to grab it. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Her face burned, but she stayed composed. The manager went on talking. Performance, deadlines, responsibility. Grace wrote every word. The room moved on, but she felt eyes on her, watching, waiting for her to break. She didn't. The meeting went on. The manager, sharp as always, made a few cold remarks. "Being late shows carelessness," he said. "Even one delay affects the entire team." He didn't look at Grace when he said it. He didn't have to. She sat still, nodding slowly. "Understood." The two girls at the far end whispered behind their folders. "I think it's happening today," one said. "The promotion?" She nodded. "He's setting the stage." They glanced at the others in the room, then back at each other, smiling quietly. Grace remained focused, writing down the meeting points. She didn't let her eyes wander. She didn't flinch at the laughter or the whispers. Maria, sitting beside her, looked over briefly. She didn't say a word, but her expression said enough. Grace gave a soft nod, as if to say, "I'm okay." When the manager paused for questions, the room stayed quiet. The air felt heavy, thick with expectation. He glanced at the agenda, then said, "Before we close, one final point." The room straightened. The girls sat taller. Just before a name is called, the manager looked around the room, his voice steady. "As you all know, our team lead resigned a couple of days ago. We've reviewed the current team, assessed consistency, initiative, reliability." The two girls glanced at each other. A small smile curled on one's lips. He continued, "One person stood out, not because they asked for recognition, but because they stepped up when no one did." Another pause. He let it linger. "Grace." Silence. Grace blinked. "Sir?" He nodded. "You'll lead this team until we finalize the permanent replacement." The two girls looked stunned. One whispered, "Grace?" The other said, "She's just—" They didn't finish the sentence. Maria smiled quietly. Her eyes lit up like someone had waited a long time for this moment. The manager continued, "She stayed after hours, fixed urgent documentation, and helped clean a mess none of you even noticed." She didn't complain. She just got it done. Grace stood slowly, her voice calm. "Thank you, sir." He nodded once. "You've earned it." After the meeting, the room buzzed. but not in celebration, in confusion. One girl walked up to Grace, all smiles. "Congratulations, that's amazing." Grace nodded gently. "Thank you," the other followed. "Honestly, you deserve it." Their voices were polite. Their eyes were uneasy. Maria passed by, touched Grace's shoulder. "Told you." The manager exited the room, giving her a small nod on the way out. Grace didn't raise her head higher. She just walked back to her desk, sat down, and opened her inbox. Requests were already coming in. Minutes later, one of the girls brought over a file. "Need your signature on this." Grace reviewed it carefully. "Needs a small correction here. Then I'll sign." The girl blinked. "Oh, right. Yes." Maria handed Grace a wrapped biscuit during the break. "For the new boss." Grace chuckled. "Temporary." Maria smiled. "Still counts." That evening, Grace didn't stay late. She closed her laptop on time, stretched, picked up her bag, and left. 3 days into the role, Grace walked into the office early. The lights were still warming up. The space smelled like morning. She made tea for herself. Saturday reviewed her calendar. At 8:47 a.m., a new intern spilled an entire stack of documents at the entrance. Papers everywhere. She froze, eyes wide, embarrassed. Grace stood, walked over, and helped gather the pages without a word. "It's okay," she said softly. "You'll learn." The girl looked up, grateful. "Thank you." Grace smiled. "We all mess up sometimes." As she returned to her desk, she passed the two girls. They looked up briefly. No jokes, no side comments, just silence. Grace nodded at them gently. They looked away. In her inbox, 3 project files, 2 approvals, 1 policy update to review. She took a breath, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Maria knocked gently on her desk. "You okay?" Grace looked up. "More than okay." Maria smiled. "You look lighter." That day, she didn't do everything for everyone. She did what mattered. She led. And no one needed to clap for her, because she earned it.